morning, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the Mesa City Council study session for the morning of Thursday, April the 21st. All of our council are present. First item on our agenda is a presentation and to provide direction on the citywide fiber optics efforts, including an update on the request for information. Mr. Linson, I know you've been busy.
Hello.
Looking forward to getting your report.
Yes, let me pull it up. Good morning. Oops, excuse me. Good morning, Mayor, Council. My name is Ian Linson. I'm an assistant to the city manager. Appreciate this opportunity to give you an update on our request for information that we've done out there for fiber services in Mesa. And real quickly, because we're talking about the RFI, I did want to give a quick shout out to Jess Romney and the procurement team for making this whole RFI process super seamless, getting it on the street very quickly, and just doing a fantastic job. So I appreciate all of them. So just a quick walk back in like 2 months ago in history. The reason we did this RFI was we wanted a future-proof Mesa. And we thought the best way of doing that was getting fiber optics to every premise within the city. Currently, Mesa does not have that. We have really good service, but we don't have fiber optics. So at your direction, we decided to go down the RFI path. And we had a few goals when we wanted to issue that. First of all, we wanted to generate interest in deploying fiber in Mesa. That was the main goal. We wanted folks out there to know that Mesa was interested in this, that we were not content with just kind of the status quo. We wanted the latest and greatest. But then we also wanted to familiarize ourselves with who was kind of out there in the market. So I'm sure you would have all been approached by companies over the years and months. We had as well, but we thought, hey, we need to get a better sense of the bigger picture of folks that are out there. So we wanted to do this national search. Within the RFI itself, we laid out a couple very specific goals. We wanted citywide deployment, as I mentioned. That's literally to every premise, residential and business within the city. We were looking for public-private partnerships. We had heard that we don't want the city to take this on by ourselves. It's a very, very big endeavor. So we were looking for some innovative public-private partnerships. And then we also threw out this idea of open access, which essentially means a provider could come in, lay the lines, and then allow multiple tenants to come in on their network. Going back to the future-proof idea, what that allows is we don't know exactly how people are going to be using the internet or fiber 10, 20, 30 years from now. An open access system kind of gives us the most flexibility. I'm very pleased to say that after this closed, we got a very robust response. Surprised by the number of folks that replied, but pleasantly surprised. So we got 7 submissions, and you can see those that submitted a proposal here. And then we kind of went through all of those and categorized them by kind of the type of company that they were. So we had our traditional internet service providers. Those are just, and Cox Communications was one of them that submitted a reply. So it's kind of what we're all used to and familiar with today. It's a company that would come in, own and operate their own facilities and provide basically just internet, which is what we all use today. So we got 3 of those. We had a couple of construction consultants respond, and I should just make a note here that at least with AECOM, they're kind of a hybrid model. They're also interested in potentially building a network out, an open access network, but both of those companies could assist with the overall kind of planning and development of a fiber network. So very interesting companies. And then we did receive 2 proposals from folks that wanted to provide a citywide open access network, and that was Ubiquity and Sci-Fi. So these were kind of our responses, and we've already kind of dug in. We started reaching out to a bunch of these. All of the proposals, I'm very happy to say, were like I said, robust. They were committed to working with us, and maybe most surprisingly, they weren't really asking all that much from us. They wanted to do this on their own. There was enough of a market here in Mesa that they thought they could offer great service and be successful kind of using their own business models. So I just wanted to real quickly let you know what we're doing now. So continuing to evaluate the responses. going through those. But what we're really spending a lot of time on now is reviewing our right-of-way processes. And what we intend to do here is we want to maximize the opportunity through our processes to allow as many private sector companies come in and work with us and kind of deploy their services throughout Mesa as seamlessly as possible. So we're not looking, and nor were we ever looking, to kind of pick an individual provider here. We want to make it, you know, as open and as available as possible to as many folks to come in. We also, that being said, understand if there's going to be multiple providers coming into Mesa, there might be a little bit of disruption. So we're looking to see what we can do to minimize that disruption. So we understand there's going to be, when we're talking every premise, that literally means every street is going to have something go down it, which is great because eventually we'll get better service, but it also could lead to a little bit of disruption. So we're looking to minimize that. And then again, absolutely, we're trying to facilitate that citywide coverage because as everybody knows, there are certain pockets of Mesa that are either a little bit more remote, they're less dense, maybe it's a little bit more rocky, so it's just a bit more difficult to get to. But we were true in what we said. We want every premise covered. So we're trying to see what we can do to facilitate that citywide coverage. As we kind of work through all of these things, we do have folks that are eager to go. And so we will be working on draft licenses, kind of working through all the little ins and outs of these agreements. And I'm optimistic that in the not too distant future, I might be back before you. We might be back before you with some deals for you to review. So essentially, I just wanted this to be a very quick update. That's what I have for you now, but I am, Mayor and Council, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ian.
Hey, Ian, thank you. Great work. So essentially what we're doing is that we're looking at our fiber ring. Do we actually have a fiber ring within the city of Mesa?
So Mayor and Councilmember Luna, we do have fiber and conduit throughout Mesa. We don't have a full ring that goes around the whole city, but we are very well covered with our own facilities. And so maybe where you're going with this is we have put on the table the idea of using those existing assets to help accommodate some of these folks that are coming in, if it makes sense.
Yes, and so essentially they are designing how we're going to fill the gap, if you will, deploy the broadband throughout our community. Not the broadband, but the fiber.
Yes, absolutely. And so we got to think, though, it's a fairly large gap when it comes to fiber because there isn't a lot of fiber in Mesa. I mean, there is some, don't get me wrong, but we've got a big ways to go. So, yeah, they're looking to make sure that every premise is covered by fiber.
So one of these companies could potentially come in, just lay dark fiber, and then leave it open and available for another company to come in and put and offer broadband. Yeah,
Mayor and Councilmember Luna, absolutely. And so that's kind of the open access model idea is they would be a dark fiber provider. They wouldn't actually light the fiber or provide the services themselves. They would rent it out, kind of like a mall would rent out spaces, you know, to a tenant, to a JCPenney's or something like that.
So if you're a homeowner, you may have a different internet provider per se.
You may have the option for a different internet provider. Yeah, so you can stick with what you have today, or there's another line that might be passed in front of your house. That's a great point, though, that I do want to mention is what we intend to do is it will pass the premise. Somebody doesn't have to subscribe if they don't want to. But if they did, they would have the opportunity to pull that into their premise.
And so, Ian, one of the things we can say, and this is not an RFP, it's not, we're not making a decision. I think what the RFI showed us is there was a lot of interest. And it's trying to achieve some of the same goals the city has. So we're really not here to suggest the city's going to pick winners and losers in this process. We're going to let the market move along, but we do want to use our access to the right-of-way to incentivize or encourage, you know, minimal impact to our infrastructure, and at the same time, as broad a citywide application availability as possible. So that's the role we're going to play, but we're not going to say we're going to select A or B or C. The market, they're going to come into the market as they will, but we're going to try to use our process again to try to minimize how many times our roads get cut out, encourage joint trenching or joint trenching, but also looking at finding ways to encourage through our process the incentive to cover every part of the city. So that's what we're going to be working on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson.
So I got two questions. First one is how will the companies what is their return on investment, basically, because construction's not cheap. So putting fiber into an entire neighborhood where they're not guaranteed that anybody's going to hook up. How do they make money? First question. And then the second one is, back in the late 90s when telecoms were deregulated, or when they were opened up to the free market approach, and Beth probably remembers this from her days in engineering. You know, the utilities ran rabid. I mean, there was cable companies, fly-by-night companies were coming in, installing cable. They were crisscrossing roads. I mean, it was an absolute nightmare. How are we going to ensure that that doesn't happen in Mesa, that we control our right-of-way, and that they're not just willy-nilly going everywhere, and that they're not fly-by-night contractors that are just coming in to lay fiber in the city?
Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Thompson, both of those are great questions, and the latter one is one we've been spending a lot of time on for sure. But to touch on the first question about how are they going to get their ROI, their return on investment. So I have to tell you, I mean, and it's evident by the response, these folks think they can make some money in Mesa. They think the market is there, and there's opportunity to provide a different level of service. They all go into the market with a certain take rate expectation. So they assume, and I'll make up a number, that 30% of the customers that they pass are going to subscribe to their services. So, I mean, they are taking a risk, but it's a risk that they've kind of, you know, they've done all the numbers on, and they think that they will be able to get a return over an extensive period of time. I mean, you're right. To go citywide is a very, very big capital investment. So these guys, for the most part, you know, and there's a lot of different models, but are in it for the long haul, but they expect to get a return. You know, you can't have 7 companies come in and doing it, you know, citywide. That doesn't work. So that's where, as Mr. Brady said, we want to provide the opportunity for the market to come in and do its thing, first and foremost, and some of them think they're going to be very successful. But that does lead to your second question, which is how do we make sure that we're not just ripping up our right-of-way and then, you know, somebody goes out. Now, I have to say, today we run that risk with whoever comes into our right-of-way. We still have that risk today. But one of the things that we do is we do ask for a significant amount of fiduciary kind of information from them. And we do require bonds and other types of insurance if folks were to enter into a license with us. That helps us in the event that, you know, a company goes under, helps us kind of mitigate some of the damage that might have happened. But we think, again, with the responses that we've received, these are real companies with real financial backing. At least our sense is that's the case. But we continue to look into that.
So would we develop franchise agreements with then whoever decides that they want to serve Mesa? We'd enter a franchise agreement with them?
So Mayor and Councilmember Thompson, it would actually depend on the types of services that the companies ultimately decide to offer. So, you know, if you're a telecom, you're under one license. If you're a dark fiber provider, you're under a different type of a license. There is today, there's a right-of-way per linear foot fee that we charge. So there's also franchise fees that we charge, like, for example, to Cox Communications. So there is some sort of compensation for using our right-of-way that is cost recovery for us, right, to manage that right of way. And so that is part of all of these discussions. All the companies understand that that's something that they are required to provide to us.
But Ian, let's be clear, there's a lot of restrictions on what we can do based on state law. Right? So
absolutely.
Let's not suggest too much of cost recovery or too much of us being able to make decisions. We've been preempted by the legislature on really how much we can manage this. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that is absolutely correct. I mean, a lot of this, you know, big percentage of this is dictated by state statute. The one thing in state statute, though, as I call it, is kind of the floor, is we can't give right-of-way away for free. That's, you know, that's the floor, but the ceiling is cost recovery. And as Mr. Brady suggested, though, there's kind of nuance in between there that limits, depending on the type of service provided, what can be recouped. Again, though, we look at this from our perspective, the main driving force behind all of this is we want fiber in the ground. Mm-hmm. And we want it sooner than what we were seeing happening. And we think that gives Mesa a competitive advantage to our neighbors, but also I think it would be great if all of our neighbors did it. It would give our region a competitive advantage. So that's kind of what we're looking at, first and foremost.
Mr. Luna, then Mr. Reddy.
I'm sorry. just real quick, when we deploy the fiber, which is, I think it's great, as far as is it gonna be multimodal in terms of, because we're obviously gonna put fiber to each home, but it'll be delivered via through an antenna or something like that? Because we can't trench, I don't imagine that we're gonna be trenching every neighborhood to put fiber.
Well, Mayor and Councilmember Luna, we actually will be trenching, there will be.
Can we clarify who "we" is?
Yes. Thank you, I'm sorry.
Company, not me.
It's not the city.
It's not this "we."
No, I
Right?
mean, we're
It's the
talking
market.
The market.
2 or 3 years from now. I mean, the market.
The royal we.
Yeah.
The intent is they will be trenching to each home to drop the fiber.
Yeah, so these companies absolutely will be trenching. I mean, I keep saying everywhere. It'll be the vast majority of our roads and streets. Again, as I mentioned, there are certain pockets of Mesa that are a little bit more difficult to get to, and so we are open to looking at how do you service those areas. I mean, and one idea might be a wireless type of service, but those are going to be very, very limited. The true benefit of all of this is you literally want that fiber everywhere, because that gives you the maximum opportunity to do things that come about in the future.
And will we be able to take advantage of some of the federal dollars through the broadband, the current act? Is that something that we're going to try to leverage?
That could be a possibility, and I think what we looked at is we want to see what the response for these groups are, and because ultimately the goal is if we find out that there's that last quarter mile or whatever, or part of this city that for whatever reason, whether it's market decisions or physical concerns, and we determine maybe it's an area that would otherwise really need that access to that, to the fiber, then I think we have that option. Some of the more difficult areas to get to, as they mentioned to us, are not so much the high density neighborhoods, but it could be someone that has a home that's significantly off the major roads. It's a long run to them, and they're surrounded by different landscape features, so they may be more of a higher value income than the lower income. So we're waiting to see, right? They're all working on their plans, their designs, and we'll see that, and then we can assess if there truly will be left untouched, some gaps in the areas underserved that we would be concerned about the most. And of course, we have the program that our IT department has set up, so that's one solution. But also we could look at possibly using some of our funds. Again, it's a pretty expensive venture, and just because we build the conduit doesn't necessarily mean that one of these legacy carriers are going to come and put their fiber in our conduit, because they kind of have their own preferences about their own conduit and their fiber, and that's some of the big challenges. We in an idealistic world, we'd put a big, not a pipe, but a conduit throughout the whole city and then let them run all their fiber through that. But that doesn't seem to be the preference of almost all of them. So we're struggling with the idea of how many microchensers are going to be going up and down our streets and trying to encourage at least co-locating that. But so those are some of the nuances we're still having to work through.
Okay.
Mayor and Councilmember Luna, just one thing I would add, though, I can tell you the private sector companies are absolutely looking at the federal dollars as well.
That's
so
true.
there will be some of that.
Just one. Are you working with a what is it? It just escaped me. There's a federal department that deals Broadband USA, I think it's called.
I mean, I can tell you, we've had contact with them, but for something like this, again, the role that we play is going to be to facilitate the construction.
Right. It's just to provide you more knowledge in terms of what's happening throughout the country and what federal dollars are available, as well as working with the FCC to get some federal dollars, to leverage some dollars as we deploy this, broadband throughout the city.
I've definitely browsed their website, and they're a good resource for sure.
Yeah, when I attend the National League of City meetings, I usually attend their workshops. So a lot of great information that you might want to take advantage of. Okay.
Excellent.
Mr. Reddy, I'm sorry, before you get to your question, Ian, city manager mentioned the term, we've been raising the specter of backhoes in front of everyone's house here when we talk about trenching. Mr. Brady just dropped a vocabulary word, micro-trenching. Yeah. Can you help set the expectations for what this would look like in people's neighborhoods?
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. And one thing to make clear, though, so when we talk micro-trenching, that's something that we are working on. It's not currently available, but something we are working on making available, because to accommodate, again, a bill of this size and the time frame that we want to see, it's absolutely necessary in most cases. So a traditional bore, the street has to get blockaded off for weeks in advance, and then they have to dig huge trenches, very deep. Micro trench has a smaller machine. We've actually seen it in action. It's pretty cool to watch. And they will, again, the cut can vary depending on the construction firm that's being used here, but it's usually a 2-inch wide by 16-inch deep trench that has micro conduit then dropped into it. And the benefit of it, obviously, you are not tearing up your street, as big of a section of your street, but they are able to go through neighborhoods in a day instead of taking weeks in certain circumstances. So there is equipment still, that they've got giant saw-like things, and those will be passing by, but it's not kind of your standard type of construction that maybe we might be otherwise used to.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Redia.
Thank you. Going back to, these companies need to make a return on their investment. Have we given any thought, maybe this is a premature conversation, but how we make sure they built out all throughout the city and not leaving out, for instance, West Mesa and downtown to 10 years from now, and making sure we set out portions of our city that they built out as in conjunction with other parts that maybe when they look at demographics and economics that they also work on maybe low-income neighborhoods, not just the high-income neighborhoods that they're looking at the data. So just that question, I think, is important for the equity purposes to ensure that all of our neighborhoods get this type of service potentially, not in 10, 15 years, right? But sooner than later, right? So.
Yeah, and Mayor and Councilmember Heredia, we actually, in the RFI, we made clear that it was council's priority to ensure that we are closing the digital divide, and that was a big thing that we wanted to do. Now, again, the overarching priorities, let's get fiber everywhere, and then kind of some of the solutions to helping with the digital divide maybe can come from that. They're better enabled actually that way. However, I can tell you it's not a premature conversation. We're having those discussions. One of the kind of cool things is that some of the neighborhoods that maybe have the least opportunity to afford or to get access to this service today are the most dense, and they're actually the ones that some of these companies are the most interested in, because they have the greatest opportunity to get the most customers. But that being said, we absolutely, when we talk to the companies in the right-of-way group, they're excellent at saying, give us your plan on how you're going to deploy, and we can absolutely say, well, wait a minute, you got to, if we're seeing something that doesn't look great, we can redirect them.
But let's be clear, we don't know that every one of these is going to go to every single home in the city.
Correct.
But what we're going to do in our process, whether it's through the licensing or the fees or maybe even using some other financial incentive, is to create a package that creates a carrot, an incentive for someone to get to that point, right? There may be some of these that will only cover portions of the city based on purely a market-driven, but we are trying to create the incentive somehow in this process that someone would say, okay, if you're going to do citywide, we'll let you have, whatever, a discount, or we'll do we're going to try to create that incentive to overcome the market. I also think we're at the beginning of all this, kind of like Councilman Thomas was talking about, the telecoms. This is an era that we're at the beginning of, and I suspect, who knows, and I'm not sure how much time, this is all going to evolve, right? Because at some point, having 6 providers in front of your home, well, there's only so much content and other things that can work. So we'll watch and see how this works. But at the end of the day, I think the goal is to get it in front of every home, and we're going to be there trying to help facilitate making that happen. I can't guarantee that every one of these providers is going to actually do that, but we're going to try to create the incentive to make that happen. And if none of the above can get there, then maybe we can step in and provide some opportunities to provide, other resources to make that happen.
Thank you. Any other? Okay, thank you. Any questions on this side? All right, thank you. Great report. I think it's fun to see the response that we got from this RFI. I think we all had our fingers crossed, hoping that someone would respond, and to see the response that we got was very exciting. To me, this is in response, I think, to the aha moment that we've all had at some point, where we realize that internet services are an essential utility. That in today's day and age, it's like water and electricity. For a family to be functioning, for a business to be functioning, it's critically important that they have reliable internet services. So I think that in a lot of ways, Mesa's really at the front of the parade in this nationally. So that I'm proud to see that, and look forward to your next report on how this progresses.
Great. All right.
Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda, item 1B, is a presentation to provide direction on the city's 2022 capital financing plan and to review the fire and medical department budget. Chief,
Good morning.
good to have you with us. Looks like you brought the A-team.
Yes, we do have our A-team here today. Thank you. They're coming. They're coming. We haven't forgotten about them.
There's an A- team very close to the front. I can see that.
Yeah, really.
All included. Mayor Giles, members of the council, thank you for having us today, and thank you for your ongoing support. I want to say that the last 6 months in the fire service have been, we've had some difficulties. We've had 5 months ago from Saturday, we buried our firefighter Trevor Madrid, and since then 2 more of our members have been diagnosed with cancer. But I want to say thank you to the council, thank you to city management, Mr. Brady, John Pomby. They've been so supportive of families and these members as they've been going through this, so thank you all very much for that. And then we've had tragedy 2 weeks ago here in the valley with the Salt River firefighters, the one that passed away and the one that was badly injured. How that's connected to us is because his spouse is one of our employees. And again, thank you for the ongoing support for that as well. The good news is we just got news last night that he is moving all extremities and starting to talk, which is progress in itself. So we were happy to hear that, but thank you very much, because that means a lot to us as an organization. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce my staff, all of my staff here. We have Tara Cunha, our Deputy Director. To my right is Assistant Chief John Laughlin, Assistant Chief Corey Hayes, and in the back here we have Deputy Chief Forrest Smith, and then Assistant Chief Mike Dunn. I have to say, I know Chief Dunn is extremely sad. This will be his last budget presentation. He's retiring in July with 35 years of service.
Wow.
Doesn't he look sad about that? Before we start the presentation, I do want to thank the members of our organization this past year. They've done so much. When COVID hit last year, when COVID was still going last year, members in the areas that work on day jobs that their jobs had slowed down, they stepped up and helped areas that became busier. So they worked as a team, they got things done and worked together seamlessly. And then the same with our responders and our dispatchers and transport. They continue to respond, they continue to serve the community, they continue to be dedicated to our service and continue to serve with the highest level of service to our community that they could. And I just want them to know how much I appreciate all the members of the fire department for what they've done. My senior staff, they continue to run their areas, be innovative, working on the latest and greatest on safety measures, training, all of that. And so I appreciate, I have a great team that I'm working with, and I appreciate what they do every day. So for this presentation today, each one of members, senior staff, is going to go over their performance measure, and then Tara's going to go over the numbers in the budget. So we'll go ahead and start with the department's purpose. Mr. Brady made it clear to all the directors that he wants to make sure that your members know what your purpose is. And I believe in the fire service, you can ask any member in the fire service what our mission is, and it's to serve with care, compassion, accountability, respect, and excellence. And we strive to do that every day on every call. And I know that that's something that we continue to work on, we continue to strive for, and they all know the purpose of why we're here. So thank you. Chief Laughlin.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Real quick, I'll just touch on our performance measure related to response time. And of course, this is a performance measure that we share annually with the council to keep them updated on how we're doing with our our performance measures. As you can see, we've broken it down. I believe this is the first year we've broken it down into more than just the 90th percentile. We also have 50th percentile and 75th percentile to give you a better idea of what we do most of the time, almost all the time, and then of course the 90th percentile. And 90th percentile is included because that is an NFPA standard and an accreditation standard. So that is the national that we all strive to get to across the country. So as you'll see, we are starting at just a little bit under 6 minutes for total response time. And I should take a step back. When we talk about total response time, this is from the time we answer the phone and say, fire medical, what's your emergency, to the time the parking brake hits when the truck gets to the emergency, whatever emergency that is. So call answering, call processing, time to get to the truck and get turned out, and time to get to the scene. So you can see just under 6 minutes is our 50th percentile, and then bumps up a little bit to mid 7s. And then, of course, on the 90th percentile, which is extremely difficult to meet our goal there, we're about 9 minutes. And that's at the 10th percentile being those calls that are just at the upper end of that range. So if we can go to the next slide. And this just gives you a look over time. As you can see, it goes up a little bit, it comes down a little bit, it's flat for a little while, and bumps up. We expect to see that come down as we add new stations that we've talked about. Station 21 just opened late in the fiscal year, or in calendar year 21. The Northeast Public Safety Facility, which we like to call Station 22, is opening here, getting ready to break ground. I know we're just about done with the final design on that through city management. That'll again improve our times up there in that Power Road corridor. And then, of course, with the bond coming up, we look to address some other areas of the city with that as well. So we'll continue to see this kind of bump up a little bit, then come down as we open stations.
Mayor, Council, I'm excited to get to present on one of our performance measures that we use for our transportation program. We have not presented a performance measure on transportation since we started our pilot back in 2018, so this is a first, and we're pretty excited. Our performance measure that we used is a common performance measure in any response model. It's our response times as well. And the performance is based on our Code 3 responses only. So those are the responses that are for critical patients, lights and sirens, all right? When we first decided to move forward with a model of taking our CON and trying to achieve our CON, I think one of the priorities that came from Chief Beck and Chief Camelli, as well as city management, was to make sure our certificate of necessity. I apologize, Councilmember Luna.
So the top, what is that? That's a designation from the state that allows us. Go ahead, I won't say it all, go ahead.
Exactly. So to be able to provide transportation service in the state of Arizona, you have to go through the Arizona Department of Health Services and qualify and receive a certificate of necessity. The city of Mesa chose to go in that direction I think we started in 14 and actually received it in 2015 with a lot of work from a lot of people in the city manager's office, our city attorney's office, and obviously Chief Camelli led that effort. So once we received that, the city made the decision to make sure that our response time requirements met or exceeded the same response time requirements that our private partner had been providing and were held to that standard. So we exceeded in all of those. And at this point, now 4 years into it, you can see based on these charts that we are continuing to exceed all of those expectations. So the first chart designates what our 90th percentile metric is, and that's less than 9 minutes 90% of the time for transport to get on scene. We are exceeding that. I think you can see based on that chart that we did have a little bit of a downtrend where we got into that 92 or 93 percentile, which is still exceptional, but that kind of follows the trend that we were seeing with COVID and surge numbers, and we were having some delays at the hospital, offload times, and in our public safety committee, we can talk a little bit more about some of the ways we addressed that. So our Code 3 response is to make sure that 95% of the time, we are on scene to a Code 3 response in less than 15 minutes. We are absolutely doing extremely well there, and that's based on the fact that the way the city has chose to manage our resources in our community. So we're hitting pretty close to 99% there pretty consistently. And then obviously the city chose to set a 100 percentile standard, which most other CON holders do not have a 100th percentile. But the city made the decision to say, listen, we have an expectation that we can always get to a Code 3 response, even with an outlier, even with significant impact to our overall system, we will get there in less than 20 minutes. And we always have met that standard since we went into the to the model that we're currently doing. So we're very excited, and we're seeing some really good outcome based on the transportation division coming into service.
Okay. Next. Thank you, Chief Hayes and Chief Luckland. To add to what Chief Hayes mentioned on the CON, I need to give recognition to Jason Taylor. Jason, would you raise your hand back there? He is the one that did all of the work on the CON and did it flawlessly. The state said there was one thing missing in that CON, and they've never seen anything like it, so that goes to Jason Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. I'm always very proud to be able to present on the various areas in my division and in my charge, and today I'm proud to be able to talk about our Social Services Division. And just to recap, that Social Services Division is made up of an administrator as well as 2 full-time employees, as well as interns that we get from ASU as well as NAU. And these social services and behavioral health interns assist us in providing this delivery of service, which I'm going to describe here. Throughout the year, what happens is that we will have the social services team go through our charts and take a look at where our high call volumes exist by way of low acuity type calls, or calls in which individuals where they're preventable type of injuries, fall injuries and the such. And so what that social services team will do is then go ahead and make what we'd consider a visit or an intervention, if you will. And these referrals, again, come as a result of them looking at the data as well as getting referrals from the crews. And so what you're seeing here is a chart that goes and it shows some of the trends that we had going back a few years. Now, when we take a look at last year, we had 822 referrals. And in these cases, again, these are as a result of calls that came from our crews and calls that came from our staff going through and looking at charts. These referrals resulted in 836 visits. And what you'll see here is that we had last year 177 volunteer hours, as well as 1,043 intern hours. So as we go into 22 here, you'll notice that the referrals look like they're on track. The reason why we have the 0 volunteer hours, because we were able to go back and apply the skills that the interns have into working in the program. So instead of using some of the volunteers that we had through our connectors just to go out and assist, we've been able to take some of these behavioral health students who are working on their social services degrees and behavioral health degrees to be able to apply those skills to working with those that we have out there in the community that need our services. And I tell you, earlier you heard about call volumes and response times, but as you know, our fire crews are out there working and taking care of these emergencies. But what happens is after we leave the scene, there are sometimes areas where folks need additional assistance. And so being able to have access to the social service division has given our crews and ourselves within our staff here a great deal of admiration for those folks, the volunteers, the social services staff, and as well as those interns for being able to assist the community in ways that we're not necessarily able to serve. And specifically what they're able to do is provide resources through the community partners that we have through the city and through the state, and be able to apply those resources back to these individuals in need. So the next slide then goes into a chart.
Excuse me, Forrest. Mr. Luna has a question.
Thank you, Forrest, for doing this. I appreciate that you're going out in community and assisting in all the ways that you do. You know, obviously we've had an uptick on our homelessness here in the city of Mesa. What are you doing in terms of assisting trying to mitigate the homelessness issue? If there's emergencies as it relates to homelessness, are you working with city departments and other agencies to provide some kind of services? What kind of safety nets are you providing?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Mayor, Councilmember Luna. So what we're doing is the crews will typically come in contact with those individuals for the most part. What happens then is that information about that individual will go back to our social services staff. Then they'll go back and look in and see whether or not we have information on that individual. Because sometimes we have records where we have records actually all the time we're able to keep with these individuals. We will then follow up with our own resources as well as those within the city and the state to then further follow up to see whether or not that person's in the system. And if not, then we'll go back out. And we actually talk to the crews when they'll go back out to see if they can identify that person, then to get more information from them. So really it's a collaborative effort where we may not have access to be able to provide direct services. We'll make sure that if they're not in the system, we get them into the system and then work with available resources.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And then Mayor, Councilmember Luna, in addition to that, we do have 2 members on the team with the city here, in working with the city on next steps as well on Natalie's team too.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, that was a part right there. I mentioned that we do have those members who are part of that, that team, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and here, this graph right here depicts the calls that we go on. And here specifically, we're talking about the 911 high utilizers. And these are individuals who call 911 or use the service more than 3 times in a 90-day period of time. So what we realize there is that those are folks there that may have service needs that are not being necessarily met by other resources. And so what we found is that we're able to go in and intervene in those calls. And so the idea is that we'll take a look, find out where those calls are at. Sometimes, again, they're crew referrals, or sometimes our social services team will go through, look to see if they're seeing some addresses that are popping up. Then we'll go out and do these visits. What we do is we take a look at those calls and make regular visits over this 3-month period of time, then to be able to assess the decrease and reduction of calls. So for instance, as the chart right there shows, our goal was to be at 35% in the reduction, but throughout several months, we've been able to have reductions as high as 70%. And the way this looks is the crew goes out on a call, they run into Mrs. Smith. Well, I shouldn't say Mrs. Smith, that's not my Mrs. Smith. So they may go on this individual. Perhaps she had called 911 10 times throughout a 3-month period of time. What they'll do then is they'll make these regular visits, determine whether or not she has issues with needing grab bars, or if she has anything that causes fall injuries and the such. So we'll bring in our home safety education group. They'll go through, do an assessment of the home, install grab bars, of course, make sure that they're educated about having throw rugs set off to the side, and basically set up an environment that's safe for them. As we go through, then we start to assess that reduction. So Mrs. Smith called 10 times. Then if we see that after a 3-month period that she's only called 3 times, that gives us that 70% reduction. So those are the metrics that we're looking at. And again, this is extremely valuable for those individuals, our crews, and especially being able to partner with our community partners as well as some of the city programs that are here.
Thank you, Forrest. Vice Mayor.
Hi. Thank you for doing this. I think it's a great program, but just to give us an idea of how large of an issue is this thousands of calls, hundreds of calls? How big of an impact is it to our system, and what we're doing to relieve those calls?
Okay, Vice Mayor Duff, thank you very much, Mayor, Vice Mayor Duff, and Council. What we found in some cases, just based on the staff that we have, we can only identify so much. And in some cases, we have identified that we may have one individual who may be responsible for 20 calls in a 3-month period of time. So it could be several hundred calls. So that's just for the high utilizers. We also found in the system there are other individuals who may not necessarily be high utilizers, but they're ones that we can see coming into the system. When I say coming into the system, they may be individuals who are just released from specialized nursing facilities, and they may be calling pretty frequently. So to answer your question, we're finding that it sort of goes in different waves where we find where we run into several hundreds of referrals that may happen in a 3-month period of time, with increases is sometimes where we'll see over 1,000 referrals within a 6-month period of time. And so it sort of ebbs and flows right there. But the idea is for us is to try to be as proactive as possible in catching those individuals before they need to use the system again.
So when you say referral, is that an individual? So you say hundreds of referrals, or not incidents or a call, but it's an individual.
That's correct, yes.
You've been able to transfer to services. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
Forrest, on those calls, are we sending a crew out on each of those, or are those ones that are being kind of triaged through 911, and then, you know, a smaller vehicles going out to that? Hey, how are those handled? I mean, we're not hopefully we're not sending a ladder truck out on one person 20 times over a 3-month period, when we should probably be sending a navigator or something of that nature to that person. If, you know, the old fallen and I can't get up thing, I can see, but if we're becoming their primary care physician over 911, then maybe it's time for that navigator to be put in place so that they can help them to free up our crews and our folks. So how is that working right now?
Hey, Councilmember Thompson, Mayor, Council. So to your point there, the way the system works is that a crew may have gone out a couple of times. So this is a fire crew, may have gone out. Then they may have identified that this individual looks like they're going to be in need of additional services. So what we're trying to do is, and what we're successfully doing when we talk about decreasing those return calls, is the social services crew gets the referral. And the idea is this is a two-person crew made up of 2 civilian personnel who have backgrounds in behavioral health and social services. What they do is they actually go out there in an SUV for the most part, and they basically work with that individual and their family and any other support network that they have in place. And so what they'll do is work with that individual to then be able to educate and be able to take away some of those barriers that are keeping them from being able to have a healthier lifestyle and or reduce the potential of them calling. So the idea is more of a prevention. Part of it goes in line where crews are maybe going out because the person's having the call, but the effort that we have on this back end is to make it where they're no longer having to go out there because we're providing those services as well as hooking them up with other resources.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. It's nice after 35 years to make it to the B team. Nice to be here with you all this morning.
Oh, man, I'll never live that down.
There's a lot of us that don't make it to the beat.
I know, exactly. I'm proud. Yeah. Glad to be here today. I've been asked to go over our performance measures as it pertains to our diversity recruitment. We're actually going to give a little more in-depth presentation following this, but I'll hit some of the highlights here. The first metric there is the 20%. That includes all Mesa Fire Medical employees, sworn and civilian. Our goal is to mimic the community that we serve. And right now our goal of that is about 23%, and we keep tabs on that and we can adjust that accordingly. So we're doing pretty well there in overall with all employees within Mesa Fire Medical. On the sworn side, it shows we're about 18.9%. Again, we'd like to do a better job of mimicking our community. As a point of context, from 2016 to 2021, we saw about a 4% increase in the diversity. So, and we did that without having a person affixed to that spot. So I'm over our fire personnel area, and we kind of divvy it up between the deputy chief and, you know, we're all very busy doing other things, recruitment and disciplinary processes, promotional processes. So nobody was really affixed solely on the diversity aspect. We've got Mike Guadaro here who will be with me in the presentation to follow, and he can talk about some of the things that he's done since he's been in that role since October. One of the other things we're very proud of is the bottom metric there is the 6.2%. That is our reflection of the females in the fire service. And we use that as one of our metrics because it is a male-dominated profession. So we're very, very proud that we are at 6.2% right now, with the national average for career firefighters being about 4%. So we are exceeding that. And you can see our leadership here within Mesa Fire with Chief Camelli and Chief Hayes. Great examples for the females up-and-comers in our community and in our organization.
Excuse me, Chief. Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
You know, I have to comment on this. On the female firefighters, I'm very proud that we're above the national average. On this specific metric, you don't have a target. Do you have a target or goal?
This is a brand new metric for
Okay.
us. I apologize, Vice Mayor Duff. This is a brand new metric, and so we need to look at, right, the national average is 4%. So we've already exceeded that. We've got to look and see how where we want to have that land.
I know the police department has a 30% goal by 2030, so I'm just saying, you know, maybe.
So we'll go 31%.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, but before we move off the first slide, the metric for diversity, 20%, does that include the female firefighters?
Is that the top metric?
The top one.
That is, yes, that is all employees for Mesa Fire Medical, both sworn and civilian.
But that's not that's not your question. The question is female considered in that category.
Is female considered a minority?
That's diversity.
I understand, but the definition of diversity, does that include?
That does not include female.
Okay,
no.
Great. Thank you.
Unless they're a minority female.
Right,
exactly.
right, that's correct.
one of the things I'll let, in our presentation coming up, we'll talk a little more in depth, but we've implemented a new hiring practice for years and years, as long as I can remember, and Councilmember Freeman as well. You would show up in downtown Mesa with a number 2 pencil and a bubble sheet, and you would take your written test. This year, for the first time, we've gone national with that. We figured if somebody wants to be a firefighter and be a great firefighter in addition to the city of Mesa, why not give them an opportunity, right, from coast to coast? So we partnered this year with National Testing Network and allowed folks who wanted to become Mesa firefighters specifically to test where they live, whether they go to a testing facility or even in the comfort of their own home if they have all the proper technology. So we're about halfway through that process. The written was in February. We just finished our first round of interviews, and moving on through the process, through this new process, we're looking at about 32% diversity moving through, with 10% being female. So we've seen some positive steps with this new format that we've implemented. And again, we can go into a little more detail here in the Public Safety Committee. Any further questions?
Yes, Mr. Freeman.
So Chief Dunn, on that note, how many applicants are moving forward in this next testing process due to the metrics you just described?
So on to the intern academy, we have a little over 150.
That you're going to go, will be qualified for the interim academy, or you're taking different, making different academy, because you can't do 150 at one time.
Councilmember Freeman, yes, in our intern academy, it's over 2 weekends. It's 3 days, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, over 2 weekends. Okay. And so they will be invited to come and work with our training staff. Chief Hayes runs that group. And we've had a lot of success with the intern academy because it gives us an opportunity to see them in a team environment. Some of the things that they put them through are very team-oriented, as well as to see how their attitude when they get very tired. How do they react to some of the things that we face every day out on the streets? So that once that process is over, then we will go through and make the final selection for our August academy.
Okay, thanks.
Chief, can you clarify earlier that, again, back to this beginning slide of the 20% metric, you said that we've achieved that without having a dedicated staff person assigned to the topic of diversity. Is that correct? And is that changing? Are we going forward? That is someone's job title and description?
Yes. The presentation to follow here, we've affixed that thanks to city management for approving this position in October. Went to John Pombay and talked about the need for this, and we were given the position. It's Mike Guidardo. He's here in the audience somewhere, and he will be hopefully here presenting with me at Public Safety. But now this recruitment piece is now his full-time job, and it has to do with not just diversity recruitment, but all forms of recruitment and helping through the hiring process as well.
Okay, so he's in charge of recruitment, not specifically, I mean, and part of that job description is responsibility for diversity recruitment.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. It should be higher than 20%. I think you prefaced it by saying we want our fire department to look like our community, and more than 20% of our community is diverse, just to state the obvious, I'm sorry. So I encourage, look forward to hearing what the plan is to improve that.
I agree. Thank you.
Can you do maybe just a recap why we've decided to go with the national model? Because one of the issues that I've raised is the lack of diversity, or we need more diversity within our fire medical department. How is this new model work for you? I know we're going to have a deeper dive into this during public safety. Maybe if you could just do a quick summary of why we decided to go through this model for our diversity recruitment.
Through the National Testing Network?
Yeah.
Sure. Again, trying to cast a wider net, if you will, across the country, right? If we have somebody who feels that they want to work for the city of Mesa, I mean, we've got a great reputation within the city as well as the fire department as a whole. And so we felt that giving somebody an opportunity, whether they live in Atlanta, Georgia, or New York City, an opportunity to come work here. We've also, as part of this outreach, we've also changed some of the prerequisites. In the past, you had to have your emergency medical technician certification to even apply. And we knew that that could be a hurdle to some folks, right? There's a lot of time and money invested to get that certification, to jump into the process, and then, you know, is this something I want to do? Or, you know, it kind of sounds cool, I see it on TV. Before they could even come through the door and fill out an application, they had to have that. So along with this national outreach, we've also changed that to where you can apply, you can work your way through the process, and as we get closer to the end, before we offer you a job, you'll have to have your emergency medical technician. It's given a whole bunch of people. We start the process in January, and there's a group of people that will be graduating from the local community colleges here mid to end of May. But there are also private EMT companies around the country that you can go and get a certification within a few weeks.
But Mike, to the point of both, this is kind of a modernization of how to take a test.
For sure.
Right? So we're not getting the bubbles
yeah,
on the two pencils. So, because this allows for individuals, and I think what you're suggesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you suggested that already you've seen a significant, the pool of those that are going through this process is equal to or higher than what we've experienced in previous testing approaches. So we think it's already paying off, right? Because I think Mike said it really well. They're casting a much larger net. And as a result, it appears that it is able to meet some of our goals of attracting a more diverse
population.
Candidacy.
Sure.
Now, we'll see how that plays through, but at least at the beginning, it's giving you a bigger group of individuals to look at. Is that fair?
Much more diverse group at this point in the process. And again, this is our first year doing it, but I'm sure we're going to glean some higher numbers from this, and then we can tweak it even moving forward. Chief Camelli's even talked to me about changing the oral interview part, where now people have to come to the city of Mesa to do that.
Right.
Why can't we leverage the same model for the oral interview where they live? Right now, they don't have to incur that cost to come as well.
Right, so I'm going to be like Vice Mayor Duff and challenge you as well that we increase that model. Certainly, we can go beyond 20%. We should be at the minimum 30. So.
Yeah, that's our goal. And again, everything we've achieved to this point has been done without having it. It's the desire of the organization to do this, but we haven't had it affixed on one individual. We see that between the changes we made with the test and having somebody with that's their sole job, we'll see those numbers increase.
Ms. Pillsbury.
How many go into an academy at a time? Like 50 or something? Or?
It depends on the number that we need at the time. In August, we are looking around 40.
Okay, so then the other 110 or whatever from this, would they stay on the list for the next ones, or do you you start the process over?
Yes, they will. They'll remain on the list. And we also have a group that we had to make a cutoff for the interview portion, just for time's sake. Okay. We have another group that hasn't even gone through the interview portion yet, so we have those that are left that get high marks in the intern that will still remain viable candidates, as well as some of the pool that hasn't gone through the interview process. It's a 2-year list. So as we make our way through the list, if we say we need to dip down a little further to get a look at some other people, we've got that other group that we can interview as well.
And how many people took the test?
It was just under 1,000. We opened it up.
Okay. And then, so if anyone wanted to become a firefighter for Mesa in the next 2 years, are they already past the process then? I mean, is there going to be opportunities for them to join in, or?
Councilmember Spilsbury, yes. And that's one of the things that Mike Bidar was going to talk about is our outreach to our community and across the country. He put together a campaign called Choose Mesa, and he's going to talk a little more about that. But starting now, the 2-year mark, right, they may have missed this cycle.
There's a window.
Yeah.
It's already,
right.
Not to say we're not going to hire firefighters in the future.
That was my question.
You have to really be thinking ahead.
For sure.
You want to get into this profession.
Yes,
okay. And the time it takes to fill a position is significant, right? So not only this process, right, but then even the academy lasts how long?
16 weeks.
Okay. Okay.
We have a lot of opportunities with our volunteer side, with our connectors and our cadets for somebody who's younger, junior high, high school age that may be interested in the fire service to get involved and see what we do every day.
Yeah, that's hard for that age of kids to make a decision 2 years in advance or whatever. Well, and I guess I'm just thinking about the minority and female diversity that we're looking for. If we already know what our numbers are for this 2 years, we really would be looking at another 2-year cycle before that number could
Well, remember, that's an overall
increase.
number of the entire population of firefighters. You're not gonna make up for it in
With
one
the-
recruiting.
yeah,
It's gonna
okay.
take time.
Especially,
But you wanna be
because
moving in that
civilian
direction. I'm
employees
just saying,
too and stuff.
it doesn't get resolved in this 2-year window.
Okay.
And Mayor and Councilmember Spilsbury, to add to what Chief Dunn is saying, is all the fire departments in the valley are testing, and so we're all getting the same folks putting in, and casting a wider net helps us there. But all of them are picking these candidates that are rising to the top, and these candidates are testing for several departments at the same time.
All right, now for the fun stuff. Anyone? No?
You got my attention.
Chris would get it. All right, first I'm going to talk about our mid-year adjustments or contingencies. The top section there, I'm not going to hit on all of them, I'll just pick a few. If you have any questions about any of them, please let me know. The first two are in the public safety sales tax. That was $225,000 for employee development, and then a little over $650,000 to remodel the volunteer center. In the general fund, that top one, we received a $500,000 grant, and then there was a city match for $50,000, and we wanted to put that exhaust extrication system in 16 stations. So the city funded an additional amount so we could cover all of those stations. And then we'll jump down to the 396, the safety adjustment to 21 total bay doors at 5 stations. That was to address the safety issues on those bifold doors that we've heard of for the last couple years. And then I'll just touch on that bottom one. Our medical supplies have skyrocketed. As you can imagine, the costs have just been pretty crazy this year, so we had to increase the contract and the spend by $600,000. Any questions on any of those?
No, but just for those who are following at home, this $2.2 million, this is an additional adjustment to contingency
During the year.
to last year's budget because of inflation and
Probably, yeah, pretty significant, but obviously things happen during the year and we have to make adjustments.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and these are our budget adjustment requests that were approved. The first one is a deputy chief that was moved from the PIO or community engagement area to operations, and then we're gonna hire a civilian PIO. And the second one is, it's just one recruit academy, but I broke it out so you could see that it's being charged to 2 different funds. The public safety sales tax fund is covering the portion for station 222 for those 12 positions.
So Terry, just talk a little bit about what that means when you say recruit academy. What does it take to stand up as far from a budget standpoint every time we do an academy?
So historically, I think up until last year, we would do it as a mid-year contingency. And we started doing it as a budget adjustment request, so it's in the actual adopted budget, and it doesn't look like some thing we didn't really prepare for mid-year. So this is just the cost for the full academy. And
So is that the instructors? What does that include?
yeah, it's everything. It's the pay for the 40 people in the academy, 12 of which are public safety sales tax. And then there's a whole bunch of equipment and some overtime for the people training, all the staff.
So it includes the salary of paying the
Turnouts,
the recruits
books.
themselves, right? They don't do it for free and then we hire them. They get paid. And you mentioned that was a good number you mentioned. So of the 40, 12 of them will be eventually assigned to, well, not them, but
Right.
12 positions, or adding 12 positions to fill 223? Two, sorry.
Yeah.
That we're building at Brown and Power. So we'll be bringing them on early so that by the time that station's open in 24, where are we at? 23?
Probably 24.
They'll be ready to go. Okay.
Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you. On the top item, talking about civilianizing employees and their costs and such, I know that you've been making conversions and or implementing civilianized employees in your department. So what kind of positions has fire implemented into your department to support the operations that are civilianized? I mean, I know we have a lot of sworn, but the civilianized is more of a conversation, so I just want to understand that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Duff, Mayor, members of the council. We have been civilianizing over the last probably 14 to 15 years. Several areas of our department that are now operating by civilians used to be done by sworn, and some examples are our fire prevention division with our inspectors and our investigators. Those are all sworn members now. Our public education division, we have, what's that?
They're civilian now.
I'm sorry, they're all civilian now, I apologize. Okay. So they were sworn, the sworn members used to do inspections and investigations, now it's all civilians. Our fire and life safety education division, sworn members used to do those, and now that's done by civilians. We have our, now the PIO here, that's going to be civilian. Our staffing model, we used to have sworn members do our staffing. That is done by civilians now. Our tech services, we just converted the deputy chief position in tech services last year, and that is now civilian as well. In addition to our videographer is now civilian. EMS added another civilian position to do training in EMS. So we have about, at this point, we're about 30% a civilian, but also to add to that, we have about 90 volunteers that are connectors and our CERT employees. They have taken over some of the responsibilities that sworn used to do, and I'll give you an example, is the customer service sector after a fire. Sworn members used to do that, but now our connectors, they're the ones that connect the families with the Red Cross and our social services team. All of those come out and help on a fire, and we've just had, as you know, we had two alarm fires within 12 hours of each other here, right in downtown Mesa. So they're not 24/7, but whenever they're on, they handle the customer service sector. Same thing with our CERT our CERT volunteers. They manage the training for the neighborhoods, and they manage that as well, which we used to do with our sworn members. So we have, over the years, and I want to say since I've been hired, but that was 38 years ago, we've definitely made things different from 38 years ago, but these changes have happened within the last 15. We've started incrementally changing that, and so we have several positions that are run by, and they're doing a great job.
And Mary, transport is all civilian.
Right. And
what
then
is that, 50, 40, 50?
About 54 to 56,
54.
yes.
And this item is just specifically one position, so, but
Yeah.
yes.
It just brought up, the discussion on that, and so I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more, of the positions and what kind of positions they are. Seeing that most of them are more administrative or service, they're not an emergency position.
Well, the transports are.
Yeah, so they are, yes, they do, they're all, mostly our support positions. And to Chris's point, the transport does provide the transport for the, for the first responder calls. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, every year we submit a 10-year life cycle replacement schedule to OMB so they're aware of what's upcoming. It's usually something with a useful life and is over $10,000. That top one, so we used to have software budgeted in each activity, and a lot of those software fees fluctuate drastically, and when they're in small budgets, we would run out and just have to move money around. So we kind of followed PD's lead and created a software activity. Typically, it's not this high. We implemented a new records management system this year that was $750,000. Ongoing, it'll be $250,000 a year, so you'll see that number come down. On the small vehicle replacements, that's 5 pickups. We had some dispatch consoles and chairs that are beyond their useful life. The thermal imaging cameras, that's a high number as well. We're replacing 45 of those. They all have to be standardized, so that's why we're doing them all at once. Then there's extrication equipment, better known as the jaws of life, assorted fire hose, secure media storage to store our dash cam footage, which we had previously not been storing. Ventilator maintenance, a whole group of mannequins are being replaced, and then the citywide AED program, that's for AEDs throughout the city and the pads that go with them. And just a little fun fact, within the last 2 years, the AEDs were utilized 6 times at different facilities in Mesa.
I'm sorry, for those, AED stands for?
Automated external defibrillator.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We appreciate you taking that on, that responsibility.
I didn't want to put Tara on the spot. Okay.
I could have guessed, but might not have been.
They're lifesavers, how's that?
Yeah, they're the things on the wall and they tell you what to do. Okay, so this is the funky slide you guys have seen a few times with other divisions. On the first, the top portion, it's just our public safety sales tax, so I carved that out, that fund. It's currently funding about 43 positions, sworn positions and 2 civilian positions. And next year we'll add the 12 for the Northeast Public Safety Facility. The revenue's currently coming in around 13 million, and our year-end estimate is slightly below budget. That's mostly due to the fact that in the fund we budget all of the positions and the overtime is fully loaded. I mean, not fully loaded, topped out. And most of the employees in the overtime being used, they're not topped out employees. So that's a little bit, looks a little bit lower for the year-end estimate. The department support line looks like there's a reduction in the budget. However, it's not. The public safety sales tax is much more fluid than some of the other funds. So this year we were able to add several projects and have funded them out of that. So the bottom section is the general fund, capital grants, transportation, quality of life, and Falcon Field. It's all of those kind of smushed together. So just to carve out on the general fund, we are forecasted to be about $5 million over budget in just the general fund. Some of the major factors include the 5% merit increase that wasn't budgeted, $600,000 in the mid-year fire catch-up that we had earlier in the year. Our vacation and retirement payouts were over $700,000 this year. And then, of course, the overtime in operations, dispatch, and EMS, mostly due to COVID cases and pods. Medical supplies, like I told you before, were addressed through contingencies. So then in the revised budget, they were in the revised budget. And so was inflation and the 5.17 increase across the board. Actually, those are the proposed budget, sorry. No. The inflation is in the proposed budget across the board. And then we have a $2.7 million increase in that proposed, the last column, for the additional PSPRS payment. And then one thing on this bottom portion, on the incident response, on the far left, on the 2021 year-end actuals, it looks a little strange because the Mesa Cares Fund should be part of that incident response. So it's about 70 million, not 42 when you look at it.
In the actuals.
Yeah.
So we were able to cover some of those costs with the CARES funds, and so. Just that 1 year, though.
Yes. And then it looks like it's only a slight increase, and that's because it's all the funds, once again. So if it was just the general fund carved out of this bottom portion, our revised budget for 22 going to next year is 2.5 million over. So it just doesn't look like that because all the funds are in there.
And then just one point to note, the last number on that, on the bottom of that page, shows 23 new positions being added since the end of the 2021 year. I know there's been some discussion about staffing, so we have 23 additional positions since 2021 to 22, 23. And then obviously if we are able to go to get council approval and go to the voters for the additional fire stations, then that would bring on additional staffing with each one of those fire station also.
This is kind of in the weeds, but why is Falcon broken out? Why is that a separate accounting?
Because they get paid, they help pay for that service on
the airport.
At the airport, yeah.
Right, and I was at a Gateway Board meeting yesterday where we talked about it.
And they are looking at taking on that themselves, so it's a little different.
Okay, so does the airport chip into the fire department? And isn't that also true at Gateway?
Yes.
I think I approved an
I think
expenditure yesterday for $1.5 million.
Right. They do pay some positions at Gateway, and also, was it a half or one position at Falcon?
Inspector.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, why isn't
Just a little different
Gateway in this?
relationship and how we account for it, because one is the city department. I don't know if is that how we do it, Tara, why it's different here? Than
Why it's a different fund?
Well, how we do it for Falcon versus how we do it for Gateway. I guess we have a specific agreement.
Yeah, they
third-party
both have
agreement.
different agreements. I think Falcon is just a set number, and then The other one is a certain.
That's training.
I think one, because it's an internal city department, the way we charge it is different than the way we do for a third
Oh,
party.
because Falcon
What is
is
it, like
operated by the
3
city of
years
Mesa,
captain or
okay.
something?
Yeah, I'm sure
Just
it's
how
an
we track
accounting.
it, but it is identifying that we do receive resources from the Falcon Field operations, which we do hold separately because they receive fees separately out at that airport. But a portion of that goes to help cover the cost of services at the airport, or provided, sorry, at the airport provided by the fire department.
And typically the Falcon Field, we do have an overage, so it's covered by the general fund.
And just to make the point again, Gateway does the same thing. We get $1.5 million.
Yeah, there's a little more services, the relationship between what the fire department
Theirs
provides
includes
at
training
Falcon
and-
Field and then they do out at Gateways. Yeah, Gateway's
A separate
purely a
entity.
contractual relationship and it's just kind of a fire service. There's some other elements that I think are included that the fire department provides, inspectors and some other elements for Falcon that we don't do at Gateway.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that it?
Yeah,
All right. Did that?
that's it.
Great, thank you. Yes, Mr. Freeman.
I have several questions, Mayor.
Yeah.
So thank you, Chief, and the A and the B team for coming up here, doing your presentation, and also starting out with CARES. The CARE acronym, I think, is very important for our department, having lived and breathed that for a number of times, years in my profession. Working with you has been great. I know you served as my captain, and I've always appreciated you as a leader in the team. And as I look over the budget, and this might, Mr. Brady, as well as some of the questions directed to you, but does it the budget, does it overall reflect the department's operation? Because what I'm not seeing in here is some of what are we doing for our personnel to offset our PTSD and firefighter health and well-being, call volumes in station areas, how call volumes are affecting our response times based on some of the metrics that we've gotten. And then, what are we going to do for the future as our city grows? We're compensating for some new build-outs and fire stations, but are we looking in the budget now and in the near future to add, whether it's MRs, all hazard units? We have a lot of growth in our respective districts, and we're looking at those call volumes. So how are we going, I would be interested in graphs showing our station call and response times, their volumes, and maybe, Mr. Brady, you could explain some of that. I mean, as far as what are we doing in the future in preparation to the fire budget?
Sure, and I think Chief Laughlin touched on it a little bit. We spend a lot of time and a lot of resources using data now to make decisions, right? We don't just do it on, kind of the storytelling of what might or may be happening. Today, we independently research and look at data, I think looking over a 12-year period. Then we also sit down with planning department and look at, potential future growth in the city and the needs of the city going out into the future. And I think that's exactly why we came to council and we showed you during the strategic planning process the travel times and the incidents that are taking place in the city and why we need and requesting the approval to go forward to seek for 2 more fire stations, because certainly those are, in the areas that were, I guess, most obvious, are fairly new. Well, they are. They're new developments that now over a period of time, we see a lot of activity, right? But they're showing up as areas that we have a difficult time getting to within the standards we'd like to respond to. So we've talked about 2 new stations, 2 new fire stations, which will really make a significant difference, we think, in helping to address that. We haven't even seen yet, and I think it was mentioned, in the statistics we have today, the impact of the station at 221. We know before 221 came, it wasn't necessarily a frequency of calls. Part of that's just because it was new and growing up, but certainly the travel time, the time to get to calls was extended. Now that we have a fire station there, we believe, pretty certain, that's going to make a big difference in helping us address those responses. So those are the areas that, certainly from a growth standpoint, that's where we're looking at, right? And that's a heavy lift, right? It takes a significant amount of resources to And in both cases that we're talking about, we already have the land, so good for us for planning ahead, right? But we still have to build the facilities, bring the infrastructure, and that's, well, every week that gets more expensive. But we're committed to doing that and then bringing on additional personnel to do that. We continue to also do analysis of the calls for service across the city and the nature of those services, because the dynamics of fire service is definitely changing. It's just statistically changing, and it's been changing dramatically. And we've got to figure out how we as a city are going to take how we've done things in the past and recognize that the calls for service in the future are different, and the rate of increase are different. And so we're having those discussions, right, about, what is the right approach to addressing those models. And we've thrown a lot of things out there, and there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of people getting very excited. But at the end of the day, my job to you and to the community is to provide you the best information for making decisions. We can't make decisions on the way we did things before. Now, does that mean we have to uproot everything we've always done? Of course not. So we're still having those discussions. We're having discussions on the very fact that medical calls as a percentage of calls to fire department continues to grow. It's not going less, and it's exponentially growing. And it's growing in some areas where we're not able to get to those areas. And so we've got to figure that out, right? We've provided and we've committed to, over the years, to making sure we can provide to those all-hazard calls. And there's nothing that anybody wants to do to diminish that from where we are today. But if in some of these areas, 92% of the calls are medical calls. 92%. We can't keep creating a solution that we use for all hazards call. We've got to find ways, and I'm not trying to decide whether it's this whole debate about civilian or sworn. Put that aside for a second. The point is, we've got to have a better response to medical calls. And we've got to do it because we have community members who literally live in the middle of the city who get a different response from people who live on the edges of the city. Just because we can't get there, and it's not for our fault, it's probably just because the design of the city and the streets and subdivisions. So we're working on solutions. We're working with fire admin, we're having more discussions, we're talking to our medical director, because I think we owe it to our community to at least explore other options, and as opposed to just trying to use the same formula over and over again. And I think there's some recent conversations where we're going to kind of come up with some solutions that we need to return to council with and talk about, ways to address those. Even if it's just a pilot program to try. I mean, my point is it never hurts to experiment and try with something. And if it doesn't work, great. But if an organization can't try something and fail and not be the end of the day, then we're never going to be successful. We have to be able to try things and learn from it, and try things and learn from it, and that's what we're going to hopefully be able to do. As it relates to, I think we're doing a pretty good job on identifying growth areas from pure growth, adding new to the city. I think we've got a plan for that. What we've got to do is look back into the rest of the city and say, well, wait a minute, let's not leave behind areas inside the city today where we're not providing that same level of service. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. And I don't know that anybody knows, I don't know the solution, but I'm willing to push the ideas to make us all think about alternatives. So can we at least try it and learn from it and go from there?
Okay. Well, that's part of my comment, and you answered some of my questions. You brought to us the gap, scenario that we're trying to backfill and make the best response times for our department, because it's critical that we deliver medical services. And I agree that our medical, calls are high in priority, and there's a lot of them based on fire. However, we had two alarm fires in the last 2 days, and it was, taxing on the men and women in our fire department, but regardless, they performed exceptionally. So I'm looking forward for conversations and probably a timeline that you think that might, in our budget presentations, I think we need to be prepared to fill in these gaps and how we're going to do it and what's the best model to do it. Mm-hmm. And I'm okay, I'll say it, a pilot program, but I'm okay in seeing what's the best solution for our city, because the wheel isn't broken. I think we're adding another spoke into the wheel to make it stronger and more viable. So I'm looking forward to the continued conversations on that. But I think for budgeting purposes, again, we need to have something going sooner than later.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, Councilman Freeman. And here's my point in all this. we have a budget process and we have dates and we have to approve budgets. But this is a really kind of unique opportunity to have this discussion. And so we will probably, you know, not hold off, but I don't want to rush the decision and make, you know, a decision just because we have a deadline on the budget. I think but I don't think it's months away, but I just think we need to make sure that all parties have an opportunity to look at it and discuss it. But at the same time, I want to be careful. Yes, we're going to let data help us drive this solution, right? We're not going to just do it because it's only the way we've always done it. But at the same time, we recognize there are some benefits to how we've done things, right? We don't want to just throw those out the door. So we're trying to figure out what's that balance look like. But at the same time, all we're asking for is, can we do a pilot program? We're not trying to upend the entire system. And let us do it and let us fail. Let us revamp it. Let us do it. So I don't want anybody to think that there is a solution, that we all know what it is today, but I think what we'd like to do is create the opportunity to try different things, and maybe we do it every 6 months and we modify and change and do things like that. But at the end of the day, our stated goal is, here's what's interesting. Nobody knew there was a gap until the data scientists ran the numbers, right? And now we know where it is, we know how big it is, we can define it, and that's what now with that information, wow, we are so much more empowered to be able to make, I think, better solutions. So that's what we're going to work on.
Okay, good. One other thing I wanted to mention is we talked about the diversity component a little bit in the presentation, and for decades we've been recruiting, you know, female and persons of color throughout our organization. I can always remember that. And I was really excited when we went to a lot of us to the EVIT presentation when we gave the fire truck to the event and see all the public safety personnel for police and fire and enjoying this brand new fire truck for them and you know, retiring the old one. So, and I think to be cautious is, even though you get accepted to these intern academies, you may not be cut out for the job position. As we all know, it's very complex being a firefighter, and some will decide, you know, regardless of your ethnicity or backgrounds, it's not an easy job. Whether you're serving as a firefighter and then you choose to change your ranks in there, or in the police side as well. So again, we just want the best candidates and qualified and see if they can get through the academy and be part of our workforce. And so I enjoy, you know, increasing our ethnicity, and I enjoy the women on the fire department, worked with many of them. In fact, you were one of the first ones, you and Georgianne. Yep. And it was very controversial when you came to work for Mesa Fire back in 1983.
Yes, it was.
That's how it all started.
38 years ago, it was very controversial.
No, it was very controversial. In fact, you had to be assigned to a fire station with,
yep,
what?
Separate bathrooms.
Yeah. Men and women's bathrooms and living quarters.
Yes.
They were not allowed in any other stations. So we've come a long ways. Yes. So thank you.
Mr. Thompson.
Going back to, Chris, you hit on something a while ago. With 92% of the calls that came into one area were of medical nature. And I know, you know, when I first got elected, we were having that conversation with Chief Beck about the ambulatory, you know, transports and how we were going to figure out how to charge insurance for transports. And we've done it very successfully to help offset our costs. Are we able to do the exact same thing with the medical calls? If we're responding to, as the primary care physicians, is there a way that we can charge excess, or we can get funding from the state to help offset our costs, our citizens' costs, for paying for us being a primary care physician for that, you know, all those medical calls?
Sure. Mayor, Councilmember Thompson. So there is a way. Actually, we did it. You could do it when we did it with nurse practitioner, with behavioral health, because that was above and beyond what we do. To charge for what we do, what the citizens have paid for us to do, and that is the initial medical response. We have not charged. There's something out there called treat and release if you do that, but then you decide what calls are you going to treat and release. If we pick somebody up back and put them in bed, do we charge for that? And as a city, do we want to do that? Because they already pay for our services. And it's only like $70 or $80 you get. It's something very small. But then we have to decide. Some cities have done it. Very few have done it. But because of what our taxpayers pay for today, we're just being, mindful of that before we start charging them when we show up on the call and put them back in bed or bandage up a wound and then take them to the hospital or bandage up a wound and leave them there. As a citizen, this will be a decision by council and city management. Do we want to charge for those kind of calls? Because it's called treat and release, and they do have that. It's just a lot more billing and a lot more for, hundreds of, calls a day that we would be doing. So that is something that is out there. We haven't done it to this point just because there's a fine line of when to charge somebody and when not to charge somebody.
Well, and I guess I asked because, and we've had this conversation for many years about how, we started out as Mesa Fire and then we shifted to Mesa Fire Medical because, more of our calls are medical in nature. So all of a sudden we've become a 911 primary care physician versus a fire department, right? And so, it would be interesting to know what exactly the citizens are paying for, what standard of care are they paying for, and what are we actually providing? And that, because again, going back, our job is to protect our community from fires, extrications from motor vehicle accidents and stuff, and those emergencies like, strokes and heart attacks. But, if we're, to your point, if we're paying for something, are the citizens paying to be picked up off the floor and put back into a bed? Or is that going above and beyond what we should be focused on as a fire and medical department? And so that's what I'm kind of getting at, is exploring those areas where, what is it exactly is expected of our fire and medical department, and what are the citizens getting, and how, because, at some point in time, it's going to become where all we do is medical calls. And I don't want to get to the point to where our entire general fund and public safety sales tax is going, just to fund medical calls, because then we're in trouble, right? Because we've already seen that shift over the years from fires to medical. And at what point in time is it going to be all medical? And, because now, the materials, that are in the way houses are built and the materials that are used are more fire resistant. So I'm guessing we don't have as many severe fires anymore, and people are probably a little more cognizant of leaving candles or what have you next to curtains. But how do we offset that cost so it doesn't just chew up our budget, as medicals expand?
Sure. Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, I'll go back to your fire. I think we will always have fires, and now fires are burning faster and hotter than they've ever burned before because of the materials that are in there. There's synthetics now that are, that's why we're very conscientious about our cancer awareness. So fires, we used to say it doubles in size every 4 minutes. Now it's like every 1 to 2 minutes, fire doubles in size just because of the construction, the lightweight construction, things that are going on there. So fires are probably, I would say, more dangerous because they're burning faster now based on the synthetics and the material that's in homes today that wasn't in homes 50 years ago. That was all cotton. Now we have so many plastics and things like that. So I think in order for us to have the proper staffing across our city to be, because we never know where and when these fires will occur, it's important we have it anyway. In terms of the medical side of that, I think the program that Chief Smith was talking about here, we are doing all we can to mitigate and reduce these high utilizer calls. I think we'll always have the calls where we're going to put somebody back in bed at 2 in the morning. I mean, if it's our parent or something and they live by themselves, absolutely, we want to be, we're just like the catch-all for whatever, but we're trying to mitigate high utilizer calls. We're doing our very best outside of emergency response to reduce those kind of calls so we don't continue going on the same person for the same thing. So they're not using 911 as their primary care physician, but using them, when they need it. And so we're working on those things as we go. We're doing education to reduce, make people more aware of cardiac issues, things like that, so they can go to their doctor ahead of time so they not find themselves in a situation where they're calling 911. So I think we're reaching out as many areas as we can to try and reduce those numbers. There'll always be calls, and they'll always, across the country, these, that they need to call somebody, and I think people want to live where they feel very, very safe. And that's why they passed the public safety tax. They want to feel like if they have a medical emergency, if they have a grandparent that fell, they want to know someone's going to come. And I think Mesa provides that service and does a great job. And that's why we're here.
Thank you. what percentage of calls you transport on? Because we do collect the fee on the transport.
Yes,
I
we
think
do.
it's like 30, I don't know.
I think 40%, Chief Hayes, 40%?
We transport about 71% of our medical calls.
So
71%.
We have a very high transport.
you're getting something back on those.
Yeah, on all the transports. Do you get transport?
Yes, Ms. Pillsbury.
Or were you done? Okay. I thank you so much for all of this, and I love that we belong to a city that values our public safety officials, so thank you so much. We really appreciate everything you do. I didn't hear an answer to his first question about the PTSD and you know, that side of it, like how that's represented in the budget, and so can you give me an answer to that?
Absolutely, Mayor, Councilmember Pillsbury, members of the council. I have to say the city has been extremely supportive of us with our members dealing with mental health issues. When we've needed funding, Mr. Pombier, Mr. Brady have been very, very supportive to make sure that our members are getting the care that they need to get through this. So they've continued to support us in that arena, just as with cancer. So we're very thankful for that. So yes, we do have, and as we need it, they make it available to us.
And can I just jump in, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury? If you recall the conversation we had with the police department where they've proposed bringing on staff, right? Psychologists. So I think I'd like to go through, work through that and see how well that is received and utilized. Because if it's successful, there's no reason why we couldn't add to that eventually, provide for both sides. So, I mean, it's a very different, I think the trauma and some of the incidences are materially different, but I don't know, from a psychologist standpoint, maybe there is a way, if we find that successful to have that kind of service in-house. Now we refer people out, we have contracts, we have employee assistance programs, but maybe by having someone in-house, we'll see, and maybe we can come back with counsel on that. John, I don't know if you had.
And Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, we already have on contract something similar to what PD is bringing in-house, and we're going to compare those two and make sure that it is. But I'm going to save a question away from the Public Safety Committee because Councilmember Luna is going to ask if I don't say it. We've promised that we're going to increase our commitment in wellness in these areas. So we're outside of the budget process, we've been looking at expanding the peer resources we have available because while we're very good on the public safety side, we've got a whole city that goes through these things. So we've had these conversations. He was going to ask me the question next. We're looking at making sure we increase those commitments so that we can meet the ever-growing needs of our employees. And I think if you were to talk to Mary, her staff, both of our labor groups, Chief Cost, they tell you we have been at the forefront city across the country of providing these resources to try to get in front of a problem that continues to grow.
And I know from tours I've been on and conversations we've had that you guys take this very seriously, and so I know there's things being done, and so I wanted the whole community to be able to hear that you are putting a priority on that because it's so important. I also just want to make the comment, when we did have that meeting, our strategic planning meeting, and they showed us the map where all those gaps were, several of those gaps fall into my district, and so it's something that concerns me, losing my voice. I think we all have the same goal, and that is to make sure that the members of our community are served in the best way and the fastest way possible, especially when a lot of these medical emergencies are a time issue, right? We want to get people there fast. And so I don't care how it's done. I appreciate that the city side of it and the fire department side of it, you're working through that and trying to see what the best thing is. I know we have the same goal, and I know there's a disagreement on what the best thing would be. I just want something to happen so that those gaps, particularly in my district and the whole city, I care about everyone in the city, but not just District 2, but I do, I'm very curious and eager to see what we can come up with to make that happen. So I appreciate all of the work that's being done and the conversations being had.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's appropriate to put a plug in now for what we're going to do in a month or so from now, which is hopefully refer to the ballot a public safety bond for at least 2 new fire stations. That's a really big deal, as we've discussed. I mean, staffing and planning for a fire station is very significant in this city and in this fire department. We're talking about doing 2. I don't remember doing that before at the same time. And Councilman Spilsbury, I think I live in one of those gaps too. I live in an established, Mesa neighborhood, and literally the response times to my house are a couple of minutes slower than they are to most of the rest of the city. So this is a very real issue, and I want to pay a compliment to the fire service and to the city management. And one of the things I'm proud about Mesa is that we aren't afraid to innovate. We aren't afraid to try to get better. But we also are very respectful of the professionalism of our public safety personnel. And so I assure you that as we go forward with that this is not about saving money. This is about how do we provide the best service to our citizens, and so that will be what defines our conversations going forward. Because again, I think that's the tradition we talked about at the beginning of this meeting. We're trying to figure out how to get fiber to every home in our city, and if we do that, this will be will be a national example, and that's what we want in the fire service as well. We want to have the best responses, and so thank you so much for the presentation. I know, and my compliments to administration and firefighters. We're very proud of our fire department, and it's going to continue to grow and get better. And you've got our support. Yes, Vice Mayor.
I'm sorry, I'd like to just make one more comment about the pilot programs and experimenting with new models. And I'm all for looking, and I think we as a city, and certainly in the fire department and police department, very innovative and known for that nationally. However, on pilot programs, when we're talking about medical calls, health calls, that whatever system we try, whatever model we try, is maybe leans heavier on statistics of data that we have, because I don't want to see just even one incident that we didn't provide to a person the absolute best care to save their life. It can make a difference sometimes in life. So if there is some kind of piloted program, that we have the backup to that in an immediate sense, not 5 minutes later, whatever, to correct something that went wrong, that we have a pilot program that is supported, and then we run those statistics, but the experiment isn't on the public side. The experiment is on our data side, and we provide the support to look at what ifs. It's very important to me, and I know we've had the conversation, and I don't want to
No, I think the
drag
point is
into
everything
it.
we do will be supplemental, not reducing something. So the idea is to add to. So maybe there is a way to create that redundancy as part of the pilot programs to prove it up. That's fair. That's fair. That's good.
Yeah, and some of these areas, as Julia's mentioned, and I have some in mine area, some of the areas are more lower income areas. We have these gaps here, and we want to make sure we have the best, quickest care in every inch of our city. It doesn't matter where you live. And so I look forward to what we can do on that, so that we can improve. And I love that the fire department leads with excellence in care. It is exuded in all your members and the way you do your service. And I think you're great. And it is what makes Mesa a great place to live, is our public safety. The police department is excellent, our fire department, and we lead with that. And it is the primary service that we provide as a city, and we're so proud of both departments. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there's nothing else on this, we'll move on the agenda. The next item is current events and conferences attended. Council, I know you've been busy. Mr. Thompson.
Sorry, I had more of a statement. So last week I had a young man or a gentleman shadow me for Mesa leadership. And as we were talking about Mesa and he was asking questions, he brought up the license, the business license that we voted on. And he told me that, you know, he went to apply for his business license only to be told that he had unpaid fines that he needed to pay before he could register his business license. These were fines that were for fire code violations or what have you that he never even knew about from 2014. And during our conversations when we were talking about this business license, I made it clear that I didn't want this to be used to track people and identify people that owed fines or something of that nature. I was told that it wasn't going to be, but now I have a person that applied and is being told that.
Excuse me, Mr. Thompson, I think the city attorney is going to interject something here.
No, and if you want to finish, but we can bring this back on a future council agenda and talk about it. I
Right.
just don't want other council members to comment on it, just
Right.
so I
So
understand.
I'm just
your
bringing it to
position.
light, because I think we do need to have that conversation, because we were told one thing, but something else is.
We've always done
is
that even
happening.
before the business license. We've always done that, even before this business license. Any license you give the city, if you have outstanding fines, you have to pay that before you get any kind of license with the city. That's just our way of collecting to make sure we have people that are paying their bills. So put the business license aside. We were doing that practice
Right.
before then.
But I think when we had the conversation about the business license, we were told that wasn't.
We
gonna
can have
be-
that conversation. I don't recall that, but we can have that conversation, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Current event summary. Anything you'd like to share with us, council? Mr. Luna?
Yesterday, we attended the Child Crisis Celebration Dedication event. The Child Crisis is going to construct a new building to meet of our local communities. Child Crisis is a nonprofit here in the city of Mesa. They've been here a long time. So that'll be exciting for them, and their building should be completed in 2023. Also, yesterday attended the Source Global Tour. It was a fascinating tour how they use these panels to collect water from the air. So it's totally amazing, something that we can take advantage here in the Arizona desert. So that was a lot of fun. And then today I'll be at Mendoza Elementary School. It's literacy night. I'll be reading to Mendoza students. And this Mendoza will be celebrating 30 years as an elementary school in the city of Mesa. It's located in Alta Mesa. And if, as many of you may not know, Ramon Mendoza was one of our police chiefs here in the city of Mesa. So they named the school after him. So it'll be exciting. And I think we're going to have a celebration in August. So that's it.
The first Hispanic.
First Latino, police chief for the city of Mesa. Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Pillsbury?
Okay, so Vice Mayor Jeff and I had the opportunity to go tour Solari, which is who we use for our mental health teams and crisis teams. And I was so impressed because they do much more than that. I didn't realize the amount of coordination they do with just resources in general, besides just mental health resources. So I really, really enjoyed that tour and wanted to thank them for everything that we learned and the great work that they're doing. And I look forward to more work, more connections with them. And then we also had the JAG ribbon cutting. Were you going to mention that, Kevin? Do you want me to? So JAG Works they have a new location on Power Baseline in Councilmember Thompson's district. It's jobs for Arizona graduates, and they're working with Grad Solutions and helping provide opportunities for kids to get degrees and jobs, and that's right down what we're trying to do with this Education Workforce Roundtable, and I saw some really neat things with that program, and I'm excited about that. And then someone going to mention Child Crisis. Should I?
You did.
You just did?
Yeah.
Okay, guess I was talking. That was a great event. We're excited for them. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to bring up, what day was it? A couple days ago. We were able to obtain a grant with the help of Congressman Greg Stanton for $300,000 to redo the facade in downtown Mesa. We have a crumbling colonnade that was put up in the 70s, and this is to take that down and restore the buildings to their individual character in downtown Mesa. We have many historic buildings, but you would never know it because of that colonnade. And so we had a grant program previously, and a few businesses were able to take advantage of it. Like the Nile, particularly, they said they increased their business like 30% by having that old colonnade off and restoring their facade. And the neighboring businesses also benefit. We've had a few others. And so now we're able to, with this money, expand that program and get a few more buildings. We have the largest historic downtown in the state, and it's nice to have these funds to be able to uncover that and bring it back to its beauty. So I want to give a thank you to the mayor and Congressman Greg Stanton for obtaining those funds for downtown Mesa and making a difference also for our local businesses. Thank you.
Mayor, I just want to, and Mr. Braham, shout out to our water department. For the past 3 days, they've been chasing a water line break on North Hall, and it started early in the morning, and I think it started from a fire, mulch fire. Anyway, a fire apparatus was hooked to a fire hydrant. Anyway, the water line broke, and I mean, kudos to those crews working at 2 a.m. and for the past 3 days. I went out one of the evenings and helped them deliver water to all the residents till about 10 p.m. And they were just great. And I think they just finished. Chris still here? Chris is still here. They just finished up last night around 6:30, and then clean up today. So kudos to the crews. Awesome job. And we probably need to bump this up on the CIP project for quarter replacement.
I'm sure Chris will figure out how to do that.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right, thank you, Mr. Brady. Our schedule of future meetings.
Yes, Mayor, we'll see you a week from today. We'll see you next Thursday for another study session. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Luna.
Mayor, we have the public safety meeting. We'll start in 10 minutes.
Sounds good. All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mr. Thompson, Mr. Luna. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned.